Yeah, Fáilte go féile na Bealtaine. Welcome to our Bealtaine Festival where we celebrate our living earth. We meet every May and we have been doing so since 2005. So you're all very welcome to join us online. Unfortunately, this year we can't be outdoors. The festival is exactly what it says. We're celebrating our living earth. We're promoting responsible stewardship of the environment. We're highlighting the importance of biodiversity, and we're also promoting the natural heritage of the southeast region of Ireland. So welcome wherever you are, and through the wonders of technology, we're able to reach you all, despite the fact that we can't meet up. So hopefully next year, a lot of you will be able to come down and join in person to this wonderful festival. My name is Owen Gill. I'm with the CalMAS STEM Engagement Group at Waterford Institute of Technology, and we coordinate this festival, and we do so in conjunction with lots and lots of different groups around the Southeast. And we work in partnership because it's working together. Everybody has limited resources, but if we join up, we can make a big impact and make a real change. And that's something that we want to highlight, that it's kind of gone beyond where we're trying to convince people of the importance of biodiversity and about climate change. We now need to look at action and how we protect and enhance our biodiversity and our environment. Yesterday we had a lovely event with Dr. Mark Rowe, who was talking about wellness and nature and the importance of nature, and the real tried and proven effects of nature on our health. And we had on Saturday, we kicked off with a visit to the Lafcadio Hearn Japanese Gardens. Today, we have a very special guest, and he is Eric Dempsey, and he's going to be talking to us about the subject that he knows and loves better than most, and that is birds. But first, I want to show you some of the photographs that people have sent us in. This is from Catherine Murphy in Galway, and lovely shot of swans there on, I think is that Nuns Island, right in the centre of Galway. Nice little shot of a swan and her cygnets, and we can see up close, we can count them. Lovely thing to see at this time of the year. She also sent us in a picture of a robin. I like this one because it's showing that biodiversity is everywhere. You just have to keep your eyes open. And here's a robin on a gate post, very nice. And we can see up close that is indeed a robin. And she also sent us in pictures of these mallards as well. So these are things that we can all find in our environment, or most of us, and it's just a matter of keeping your eyes open. And we also got this nice picture from Caroline Kavanagh in Drogheda, and it's, look at that, a blackbird perched up upon some a nice blossoming tree and singing away, no doubt. That's wonderful things to see. And then finally, before we start at our main event, I show you this incredible picture we were sent from Philip O'Reilly in Clonmel, and look at that. There's at least 4 pots of gold available in that picture for somebody to find. That's the Suir and the Blue Way around Clonmel, and that's a place we'll be visiting on Friday. And we're going to have a talk about the biodiversity to be seen along the Suir Blue Way. So I am delighted once again that we can welcome Eric Dempsey to the festival. Eric is probably Ireland's best known bird watcher. He has been probably known to many through the Mooney Show over a long number of years. And also he has written quite a number of books, and we would this is one that I rely on very often, the Guide to Irish Birds. And if you're interested after, this is certainly, if you want to be able to recognize your birds, this is a good one. And we'll talk about some of his other works afterwards. But as I say, Eric has been a great supporter of the festival over the years. He's enjoyed coming down, and we've enjoyed having him. And normally we would be out in Curramore or JFK Arboretum or Mount Congreve, and maybe 100 people in tow as Eric guides us and introduces us to the birds. So now we're online. We're delighted to have Eric. And please, Eric, tell us all about our birds.
Right. Well, I'm just going to hopefully get rid of my face from the screen. And now, can everybody see that? Is that okay?
Not yet, no.
No? Can you see the presentation?
No, it's your share screen there, Eric.
Okay, I may go back here, hang on.
Yeah, okay.
This is my nightmare. I may have to go out of this and do it again.
Well, that's fine. Work away. In the meantime, I'll plug your book, Ben, if you...
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so Eric has written a memoir, which is very cheeky for somebody so young, and it's entitled Don't Die in Autumn, and it's an inspirational story. And the news is that it's available now as an audiobook, and you can find it at Audible and Amazon and Belinda, and it's really well worth purchasing and downloading, because you know, it's as an audiobook, you don't have to have the trouble of holding it in your hand and finding it. You can just put on your headphones and enjoy it. So I think we have Eric now.
Hope so.
He's going to take over.
Yeah, sorry about that. Now, can we see?
Yeah,
perfect. Yes,
that's perfect.
Thanks very much. Sorry about that. I am never been a technical person. I'm a person more comfortable walking around, getting rained on and feeling the wind in my hair and getting soaked than sitting in front of a computer talking to people. I much prefer being out in places like Congreve where we were. So hopefully everybody is tuned in and everybody can hear me. My name is Eric. I'm living in Wicklow. I'm from Dublin originally, and I spend my life, I make a living out of looking at birds, which is a crazy way to make a living, believe me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Tonight's presentation is really looking at the spring and summertime with birds. I do a whole range of talks called A Year of Birds, and it's an ever evolving talk. As I get new photographs, it changes. So, you know, if you ever see this advertised again, it will not be the same. So it's a constantly evolving talk. And what I really want to do is just share with you what is happening in the world of birds in the spring and the summer, because it is still spring. Summer doesn't really start until the 1st of June. And I'm just wondering, will we even ever get a summer? Because it just seems to have not stopped raining over the last week or two. Spring is a time when birds are looking their best. This is a blue tit. And if you can imagine those colors, how beautiful and how bright they are. And birds see the world through ultraviolet. So if you can look at that picture and you had ultraviolet vision, the colors of that bird would be incredible. Goldfinches, colors of those yellows and the reds. It's interesting. Of course, when I have an audience, I always ask them to put up their hands. You know, can anybody tell if this is a male goldfinch or a female goldfinch? There's a good question. Well, it is in fact a male, because the little tiny spot of red above the eye goes behind the eye. On a female, believe it or not, it only stops just before the eye at the back of the eye. So because it has a little bit of red going behind the eye, it's a male. But these birds are in pristine condition. They are in pristine plumage. Little grebes, the beautiful orange that they have on the side of their throat is summer plumage. And all I can do is take a look at a pheasant in spring. Look at the iridescence of that bird. And each feather is almost like it's painted, like it's carved. It's beautiful. There's blues and purples and oranges and reds, violets. It's incredible. And like even the modest birds, like jackdaws, even they are in pristine plumage. Look at the shine of those feathers. And this is the peak time for breeding. This is the breeding season. And if you're going to attract a mate, you have to look your best. There's no point in going out on a date, basically, if you're dressed shabbily and you haven't brushed your hair. You need to try and look your best when you're prospecting for a mate. And birds do this by molting. Now, birds molt their feathers twice a year. They do a complete molt. Every bird in Ireland and across the world, after the breeding season, they shed every single feather of their body. Every single feather falls off and brand new feathers grow. Now, it doesn't happen like overnight. It's not, I always said, you remember Daffy Duck on the Disney or the Warner Brothers, you know, those cartoons, and you get a fright and all its feathers would fall off. But they gradually fall off and they grow a complete set of new feathers for the winter time. And that's important because after the breeding season, you've been in and out of nest holes, in and out of nests, your feathers are worn, you are tatty by the end of the summer. And you are going to depend on a good set of feathers to get you through the cold weather because feathers are a set of insulation. So what happens is at the end of the autumn, birds do a complete molt. They're big tail feathers, they're big wing feathers, and all the other feathers grow. But in springtime, they do what's known as a partial molt. And effectively, they change their head, some of their body feathers, and some of their back feathers, but their main flying feathers stay the same. And these are what's known as summer plumage. And they are usually shiny, they're colorful. And as I say, if you can remember that a bird sees the world in ultraviolet, that even a jackdaw that looks just black, there's blue sheens, there's green sheens to our crows. In ultraviolet, those birds are glowing. And if you are shiny and if you look healthy, you will be successful. I always liken this to shampoo ads. You know, if you ever see shampoo ads, there used to be one, you know, are you the girl with the shine in her hair? Shampoo ads never sort of say, are you the girl with clean hair? They never say, oh, you know, we can clean your head and your hair with this shampoo. It's all about shine. And shine is a sign of health. So all of the shampoo ads are telling you that you have shiny hair, therefore you are healthy. And birds are the same. They do this molt in an effort to look pristine, to look brilliant. If you are healthy looking, you will have beautiful colors, beautiful shines, and you therefore have a good chance of being successful. Other birds have adornments as part of their summer plumage. This is a little egret. Now, when I started bird watching first many, many years ago, little egrets were unknown. Now you guys down in Waterford, you know, they're all along the estuaries. They're everywhere. We have a pond in the garden. I've had little egrets on the pond twice hunting newts and frogs. I never thought I'd see the day where little egrets would be that common. They're like small herons. But if you see the beautiful plumes from the back of their head, the beautiful feathers on the breast, these are elongated plumes. And if you look at the feathers on the back, just draping over the back, they're called aigrettes. And these are just summer plumage. They don't have those in winter. These are used as part of the display, the courtship display. When these birds are displaying to each other, all of these aigrettes and these plumes are exaggerated. It shows the bird is in prime condition. Lapwings are the same. Look at the colors of a lapwing, aren't lapwings stunning? And remember again, if you're a bird, you're seeing this in ultraviolet, so it's 20 times, 30 times brighter. But the males have much longer crests than in wintertime. And again, it's a sign that you are healthy and that you would make a good partner, because that is what's happening at this time of the year. Birds are beginning to seek partners, to establish territories. And if you are fit and healthy looking, well, then you will be irresistible to the opposite sex. It's the same all over the world. For other birds, being in summer plumage has a very practical reason. This is a bird which you will see all around Waterford. It's called a black-tailed godwit. It's one of our shorebirds. Now, in winter, this is what it looks like. It spends its life on mudflats. It spends its life on grey, open mudflats, feeding away. But in summer plumage, it transforms into that. All those grey, hang on, just go back, all those grey feathers, all these grey under parts, they are totally transformed. They go into a full summer plumage. And there's a very practical reason for that. Because if you can imagine that a godwit in winter is going to be on a grey mudflat, if you are bright orange on the grey mudflat, you're going to stand out. If a predator is around like a peregrine falcon, you are going to be got because you will be the one that will stand out. So being grey in winter is useful. But on the other hand, if you go to Iceland and begin to nest up in the Arctic tundras, where all the vegetation is orange, you need to be camouflaged. So the godwits go through a total change. They're like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They become bright and colourful. But when they lie down into the vegetation of Iceland, they just disappear. If they stayed orange in winter, they would stand out like a sore thumb. If they stayed grey in summer, a grey bird nesting on the ground, which is orange vegetation, likewise, they would easily be caught. So summer plumage has several reasons. It's to show that you're healthy, but for species like godwits that nest on the ground, it is also vital to be successful at breeding. Even our common birds are beautiful. I mean, look at the colors of the male mallard. And if you look at the sides of the bird, you'll see that they're fine little variegations. They're tiny little scallops. They're absolutely wonderful feathers. And that pattern is called vermiculation. It's apparently a Latin word or a Greek word, I'm not sure, which refers to worms, worm-like, which is the reason why that spaghetti, was it vermicelli, is it's basically like a plate of worms. Sorry to disgust you, but that's basically what vermicelli is about. It's vermiculated. But the male is bright and colourful. The female, of course, is dull, brown and boring. And there's a very good reason for that. She is the one that does the incubation. She is the one that looks after the chicks. The male, being brightly coloured, will have nothing whatsoever to do with the chicks. So in many species of bird, you will have the male all bright and colourful, but the female dull and brown and very nondescript. And that is because in those cases, she is the one that looks after the eggs, does most of the incubation, and looks after the chicks. It's a time for courtship. And, you know, I'm sure you've heard the term love doves. Well, they're called love doves for a very good reason. They really do have wonderful courtships. And, you know, let's face it, there's nothing like getting your neck pecked at to sort of, you know, get you in the mood. And that's basically what they're doing. They are reaffirming the pair bond. They are reaffirming, you know, the bond so that they can go on and nest. It's called mutual grooming. And it's a very gentle, and the birds, the male is cuckooing to her all the time. So it's a very beautiful courtship to watch. But if you're going to invest your time laying eggs, building nests, you need to have trust in your partner. You need to trust each other. And this is displayed when you look at gannets. Gannets are our largest seabird. They have a wingspan of about 6 foot. Now, anybody who has ever handled a gannet will know that those beaks are razor sharp and they are about that length. They would tear you apart. Some of my friends who are involved in ringing and doing work with gannets carry their scars almost like a badge of honor. But look what these birds are doing. They are wing or bill clapping. They're doing a courtship display that is involved with basically hitting their beaks together. And that is a sign of trust. One blow from a bird like that could kill you. You could be blinded. So to actually allow your partner to get that close with its beak and to do that display, it's a real sign of trust. So all of this is happening around us at the moment. It's well into May, and lots of birds are already well into the breeding season. And the main thing that we recognize at this time of the year is birdsong. If you've ever wondered whether robins had tonsils, there's your answer. Question: is this a male robin or a female robin? It is going to be a male robin. Even though males and females are identical, male birds are the only ones that sing in Europe and mostly across the Northern Hemisphere. You get duets on some birds, particularly in the tropics. But in Ireland, the only birds you hear singing will always be males. Now, female robins may start singing in the winter if they are isolated. They actually go through a physiological change. They pump themselves up with testosterone, which allows them to have some sort of song, because male robins are very territorial. But in all, birds that are singing are males. And birdsong is all around us. I've been involved with the Dawn Chorus for probably 18 years, the one that we do on the Mooney Show. And a couple of years ago, we did a wonderful one which traveled across the world. I was up in the Netherlands doing my broadcast. And we started off in India and we worked all the way across and ended up in Iceland. It was a fantastic broadcast. But the Dawn Chorus was starting in India, hours before us. As soon as the sun is up, the birds started singing and traveled across. So a Dawn Chorus is really, really worth doing. If any of you have never done a Dawn Chorus, do it now. Now is the time. This is the month to do it. Stay up and even just open your windows if you lie in bed. It's a wonderful experience. If you have kids, if you have grandkids, if you have anything, do it. It's the most incredible experience. And all around us, we have birds singing, robins, and of course the wren. The wren is one of the smallest birds in Ireland, but it's the loudest bird in Europe. We can hear a wren from over a mile away. It's like 1.5 kilometers almost. And wrens have been studied for their songs. I suppose the question we ask is, why do birds sing? Well, there's several answers to that. Firstly, it's the males that sing. So it is a male proclaiming its territory. It's a sort of a non-confrontational way of establishing a territory. So you sing, and if you are good and you're healthy, you'll sing a good song. So you have a territory. Once you have a territory, a bit of land, a few acres and a nice house, then you need to attract your female. And the interesting thing is that females apparently are capable of judging the quality of a male by the quality of the song. So if you don't sing well, you don't have a chance. You will not have a good territory and you will not get a female, because she will know he isn't singing very strong. He can't be a very fit, strong male, or maybe he's a young bird. And if he's young, sure, he hasn't got a good territory. And I need a good territory to basically raise my young. They also sing to inform their friends, their neighbors, that they are still alive. At dawn, birds start singing. And in many ways, it is to establish the status quo. If you have three wrens, wren A, wren A, wren A, wren B, and wren C. For us, the sound of a wren is just all the same. A wren is a wren is a wren. But for the wrens, they recognize each other's call. So if wren A, like that French, wren A, if wren A starts singing at dawn and wren B hears that and replies, and wren C hears both of them and replies, they know they've all survived. But if one of those birds don't sing, it means that one of them have been taken or something has happened. And within seconds of realizing that, the two other wrens will move into that wren's territory and carve it up. Wren B might say, wren A had a wonderful bramble bush and that has a lot of food there. So I'm just going to take over that area. So they can instantly tell if the status quo remains. And also at dusk, when birds sing at dusk, and the dusk chorus is equally beautiful, but not as long, they will carve up the territory of another bird if they fail to sing at dusk. So there's a good reason for it. And if you look at a bird like a wren is an extraordinary thing. It has two sides to its cavity in its chest. And there's a thing called a syrinx, which sits and vibrates inside the cavity of the chest. And if you listen to a crow will just go caw, caw. He just has one cavity, one of these syrinx. But wrens have two. And one produces low pitches, one produces higher pitches. So that when a bird like a wren opens its beak, you're getting two songs mixed together. And they have done amazing stuff with wrens. A wren is able to sing 27 notes per second. It's quite phenomenal for such a small bird. And it is the same for all of these birds. This is a white throat. So you have your resident birds like robins. You have your resident birds like wrens. But then we have the migrant birds coming in. And the first thing they do is to get a territory. And it's the males of the migrant birds that tend to come in first. They will be singing for up to 1 or 2 weeks. So within the migration period, the first birds that arrive are usually the males. This is a whitethroat, and you can tell it's a whitethroat, does exactly what it says in the tin, as does blackcaps. Now, some people may have blackcaps visiting their gardens in winter. Those blackcaps, as we speak now, are in Central Europe. They're in Germany, they're in Poland. The blackcaps we have in our woodlands are birds that have spent the winter down in places like France and the Mediterranean. They're all competing for males, are singing to compete for territory and to get females. Even birds like sedge warblers. Now, sedge warblers are quite a plain little bird. And as their name suggests, they are in reed beds and sedges. But look at that bright orange beak. Don't forget, these things glow in ultraviolet. He's sitting in there and he is singing away, and that beak is what can be seen. I love sedge warblers because sedge warblers, they're like jazz singers. They improvise. They don't sing the same song twice. No sedge warbler sings exactly the same notes, and no sedge warbler will sing the same notes twice. They just make it up as they go along. And as they get older, they tend to throw in other sounds, which adds to the quality of the song. And it also implies that they are mimicking other birds, which means they've been around a long time. And if you've been around a long time to learn these other songs, well, then you must be a successful bird. So the more complicated your song for a sedge warbler, the better it is that you will find a female and that you will nest successfully. But all of these birds are competing with each other. They are all trying for their voices to be heard above the others. And that is very, very difficult. How can you get attracted to, how can a female find you if your song is like this bird called a grasshopper warbler? Grasshopper warblers have the quietest, lowest pitched sound you can imagine. And it's like a fisherman's reel. It just goes, that's the song. That's all it does. So how can a grasshopper warbler proclaim its territory, and how can it find a female? Grasshopper warblers are clever. They realize they can't really compete with all of these other birds singing, wonderful songs. So the grasshopper warbler chooses to sing at night when all the other birds have shut up. So he's the only song out there. Secondly, low pitches, low frequencies travel better in cool air. So his song is thrown much further out than it would be during the day. And thirdly, and very cleverly, he knows that female grasshopper warblers migrate at night and arrive into Ireland at night time. So he really is the master of the nighttime. He's singing when the females are coming in, when he's not under competition from other birds, and when his voice will carry the furthest. It's brilliant time management on behalf of grasshopper warblers. So all of these birds are singing. So please do go out and do a dawn chorus. I love my dawn course. I've done dawn courses. I've been all around the world and I've experienced dawn courses, everywhere. They're incredible. The first dawn course I did, I'm from Finglas in Dublin, a corpo house, and I did a dawn course, when I must have been about 7 or 8 with me dad, just sitting in the back garden. And I have to say, listen to the first dunnocks of the day and the first blackbirds, the first robins. It was the best dawn course. Your first dawn course is your best. You might forget, your first kiss, but you'll never forget your first dawn course, believe me. And in the cities, spring really has arrived when you see swifts circling. Swifts are in big trouble. They nest under the tiles of houses and under the eaves. Not in the eaves like a house martin, but they go in. They need to get in under the tiles and under the eaves. And of course, we are now obsessed with conserving energy. So we have sealed up our houses, sealed up our buildings. And swifts are finding it harder and harder to find enough nesting sites now. And oftentimes they travel so fast, they come whizzing in to what they presume is the same nest last year, only to find that it's totally sealed up, and many are killed coming back into the nest for the first time. Swifts are simply stunning birds, the fastest bird in the world. They can travel at some incredible speeds, like 130 kilometers an hour. They do everything on the wing. They are able to catch all their food on the wing. They are so fast they can chase raindrops to drink. They mate on the wing. They even sleep on the wing. If you've ever had that dream where you're falling, that dream, you suddenly wake up and you go, God, I was falling there. Swifts have that every night because guess what? They are falling. They go to about 15, 20,000 feet and they sort of go into a torpor, a light sleep, start gliding down, wake back up again and go up, and they do that all night. And the extraordinary thing about swifts is that when a young swift leaves the nest, he's 6 weeks old. They're totally independent. The females and the males stop feeding the chick inside the nest, and it has to come out and start flying. Once it leaves the nest at 6 weeks, it is totally independent. That bird will move down towards southern Africa, and it will move just south of the equator, moving around there. And the swifts don't come back to Ireland until they're at least 3, maybe 4 years old. That's when they're mature enough to start nesting. There's no point going further north when you're too young to try and get a nesting site. In the 4 years that bird has left, say, your house or your eaves at 6 weeks old, until it returns 4 years later, that bird will have never, ever stopped flying. It will have flown 365 days a year for 3 to 4 years, non-stop. They really are worth protecting. Waterford is very lucky in that you have a lot of swifts, but swifts are in big trouble. I am patron of the Dublin Swift Group, and we have met city planners, and we are trying to get city planners to incorporate what are known as swift bricks into their buildings. And it has been worked very, very successfully. And birds like swifts are an integral part of our heritage. We talk about heritage as, our built heritage, our language, our art. I believe that we really do need to look at the environment as part of our heritage, and swifts are part of our city heritage. For some of the more senior bird watchers among you, you may recognize that eye. Out on the remote islands, offshore, places like Tory Island, Inishbofin, and a few places like Belmullet in County Mayo, this is a sight to behold in among the nettles. Who is looking at who? And they might just stick their head above the grass line to give you a beautiful view of that lovely rich eye and that delicate, delicate plumage. And if it emerges out, you really are lucky to see the beautiful orange wings of a corncrake. And they are called corncrakes because that is what they do. That's the sound. Corncrakes are now really restricted to some of the most remote areas where old-fashioned farming is still the way, or where the areas are conserved for them. Silage spelt death knell for corncrakes. And I suppose before that, modern machinery. They nest on the ground under cover, and they are very reluctant to break cover. And once we started using machinery, even though the machinery was slow, the female would be reluctant to leave the nest, would be reluctant to leave her chicks, and the whole lot of them would be killed. Then you add silage to that. The first cut of silage takes place in May, and then again in June, and then in July. The birds didn't have a chance. The population is down to maybe 100 pairs. And again, they are all on the remotest edges of Ireland, where traditional farming and nettle beds and hay meadows are still present. But it's amazing how quickly birds like this can slip away from us. As I said earlier, I'm from Finglas. My sister recounts once her teacher asking them to stop talking so they could listen to the corncrake outside the window. Now think about that. That's the 1960s. There was corncrakes calling around Finglas in North Dublin in the 1960s. There's no way. The corncrakes, I've seen just one migrating corncrake in Dublin, and that was a bird along the coast. And that is I'm bird watching now 45 years since I was a kid. In 45 years, I've just had one sighting of a corncrake. In the 60s and early 70s, corncrakes were all over the country. And because they call at night, they became a nuisance. You talk to old farmers and they will say that as kids, their father would be throwing boots out into the field to get the corncrakes to shut up. And now many of those, people living in the country, corncrake just means nothing to them because they're not there anymore. And it's such a shame that this is part again of our rural heritage lost to us. In summertime, food is the key. It doesn't matter if you are a grasshopper warbler or a blue-tit. Food. You need to be able to find food. And the majority of birds that we have in summer feed on insects. And our insect population is in big decline. Anybody who has been listening to, people like David Attenborough and many others, our insect population is in rapid decline. And all I have to say is anybody who's ever driven from Waterford to Dublin, say 30 years ago in the summer, you would need a paint scraper to get rid of all the insects that were, plastered onto your windscreen. You do that journey now. You very rarely will even have to, touch your windscreen wipers once. And that is just an anecdotal indication of the depletion of our insect population. You take this little blue-tit. He needs 18,000 food items to feed his chicks. 18,000. Caterpillars, aphids, greenfly, worms, insects, spiders, as do coal tits, grey tits, and robins, and wrens, and dunnocks, and warblers. Unless you have food, you will not be able to raise your young. And that's the reason why I say if anybody's listening, and you like gardening and you're proud of your garden, please don't use insecticides. Please do not get rid of your insects. People have even said to me, oh, well, look, I never use insecticide. I use sudsy water and that cleans all of the aphids from my roses. You're still destroying that food source. We talk about biodiversity and we spoke about it earlier. We have to try and keep areas that are wild. If you have a nice garden, leave a little bit wild, dandelions, nettles, wild flowers. It's so important. These are all vitally important. It's a link up of all of our biodiversity. I go bananas. You're driving along the motorway and there's beautiful flowers and wildflowers growing in the center or along the verges. And then you go the next day and the county council have come along and it's like a snooker table and there's nothing there. So, let's try and leave a little bit. Food is vital. Doesn't matter if you are a blue-tit looking for aphids or, a dipper feeding her young along the river. If the river is polluted, if there's too many nitrates in that river, you will not have the larvae, you will not have the small fish, you will not have everything that these birds need. Food is the key. And one of my favorite little birds are sand martins. And they nest on the cliffs along coastal areas, and also you'll find them on the bogs. But again, aerial insects are in demise. They really are. I mean, I often say to people, when's the last time you heard a grasshopper? You know, when I was a kid, there's grasshoppers everywhere. They're in your back garden. You know, when did you hear a grasshopper last when you're out and about? It's an interesting question, particularly for people who might be of my vintage, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s and older. Grasshoppers are in big decline. You know, little gang of swallows need thousands of insects, you know, to feed successfully. It's all about food. And in my wildest dreams, I never thought I would ever live to see this happening in an Irish woodland. For those of you who don't know what this bird is a great spotted woodpecker. Woodpeckers weren't in Ireland up to 15 years ago, up to 20 years ago. You would just get the odd one perhaps in winter. But what happened was that about 15 years ago, they started venturing over from Wales and Scotland into Ireland. And they started doing this because it seemed that the habitats were full. Young birds simply couldn't find nesting sites, you know, or their own habitats, their own territories. So they started exploring. And there was a lot of talk back in the late 90s about whether we will reintroduce great spotted woodpeckers, because they were here 300-400 years ago. And the theory was that they probably wouldn't survive because the variety of prey items like this big beetle larvae wasn't in Ireland. So there was no way they would succeed. So all of this discussion was going on for about 10 years, and the great spotted woodpeckers just decided to come here by themselves. And guess what? They are now thriving. They are all over Ireland. They are moving rapidly through the country. And I remember 2 years ago at Congreves, the big area outside of Waterford that we did our walk, there was a great spotted woodpecker calling and drumming in Waterford. That's extraordinary. And I'm even more lucky in that I have a male that comes into my garden and feeds on the feeders every day. I have a little bit of woodland. We've about an acre, and we've created a nice bit of wild garden. But this bird comes in to my feeder every day. Now, if people are interested in photography, birds on feeders don't look that great. So what I do, I put up beautiful old logs that I find and put them beside the feeders, because many birds like to come in and land on a natural looking log, look around to make sure it's safe, and then go on to the feeder. So if you want to cheat a little, put up a nice piece of a branch and it will look very, very well. This is the male, and you can see it's a male because the male has a little touch of red just on the back of its crown. The female is all black. But what this bird did last summer really, really just, it was just amazing, because he brought in a juvenile bird, and the young woodpeckers have a red crown, and you can see that just under the tail, it's not as brightly red as the male. And he brought this bird in and started feeding it pieces of peanut from our nut feeders. So this young woodpecker sat on the log and sat waiting to be fed, and the male was going up to the feeders, taking small pieces of nuts and feeding the woodpecker. In my wildest dreams, I never thought I would see the day where great spotted woodpeckers were nesting in Ireland, and that I would actually have a male woodpecker feeding one of its young right outside my dining room window. I still look at that photograph and have to pinch myself. That is an image I never thought I would see, never mind photograph, in Ireland. Go out to the Seaboard Cliffs, and you've a lot of cliffs all the way between, you know, Waterford out as far as Dungarvan and Tramore and all that area. And life on a seaboard cliff is extraordinary. It's high-rise flats. They don't build nests. They perch on ledges. You've birds like kittiwakes, all along our coasts, small gulls, and they have one or two chicks, and the nest is built of seaweed and grass and poo, basically, and they are right on the edge of a cliff. And the young birds stay there for at least 4 weeks, and they daren't move. So their first 4 weeks is like pinned to a cliff face, terrified of moving. So these birds are highly specialized cliff dwellers. The young birds know not to move. And kittiwakes are called kittiwakes because they go kittiwake, kittiwake, kittiwake. That's their call. It's unusual. It's not like the usual screeching gull call. But there's another bird that it nests along the cliffs. They're first cousins of puffins, razorbills, but this bird is called a guillemot. They're all very similar. And look at that young bird. Young guillemots have a voracious appetite. They feed on fish that is regurgitated up by the female. And he sits there waiting to be fed. But at about 7 days old, the adult guillemots have a problem, because this bird now begins wandering around and he will become food for gulls, great blackbacks and herring gulls. So they're terrified of leaving this bird on the cliff because he's going to be nabbed. But he is also looking for food. So if he doesn't get fed, he'll starve. And if the female or the male goes off to find fish, he could be cut. So they have this dilemma, and they solve it very simply. When this bird is about 7 days old, as this bird is, they'll bring them to the edge of a cliff, and the male and female, particularly the male, will do most of this work. He will go off down into the sea below and start calling to this little guillemot. And this little guillemot will walk up to the edge of the cliff and jump. And they often hit rocks, they often tumble, they often bounce, but they bounce into the sea and they find the adult. And then the two of them will swim off out to sea. And it's out at sea, about 40 or 50 miles out to sea, well away from the nesting cliff, is where these birds are fed, because they can swim. And if you are threatened as your little guillemot, if a gull comes over, you can dive under the water. So you're fully protected. And birds that live in the oceans, live out to sea, often are dark above and white below. And that is ideal camouflage, because if you're a gull looking out over the sea and you're dark above, you're sitting on the sea, you will blend in. And likewise, if you're a sort of a predatory fish that's underneath the water, you're looking up at a pale sky. And if you're white underneath, you're perfectly camouflaged. So these birds have evolved this technique to protect their one chick that they raise each year. And when you think about it, the effort that all of these birds go into to raising their young, they have to, hold a territory, sing, get that territory. They have to mate. They have to build a nest. They have to lay the eggs. And that's some birds will have 6 or 7 eggs, maybe 8 eggs, 10 eggs. And that's done over a 10-day period. You then need to incubate those eggs. And then all of those chicks, you need to feed them. And then after you feed them, you need to get them out of the nest. And you may stay with them for several days, several weeks, even a month or two, like the guillemots, with your young, to get them off out into the wild. Your genes depend on this. Your genetic disposition is designed so that your genetic print is passed on. The effort that birds go to raising their young. And then, of course, we have the cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Cuckoos are insane. They really are. You think about it. They lay eggs into other birds' nests. They don't build the nest. They don't incubate the eggs. They don't rear the young. They just do nothing. They just give an egg to another nest. It's an extraordinary evolutionary thing that they have done. And if you can imagine that a cuckoo will come back into Ireland, the males come back first, like many migrants. They will hold a territory. They will sing. The cuckoo is the song. Females have a gurgling sound. But they have to find a territory that has a lot of nesting birds and suitable nesting birds. An awful lot of birds, like an awful lot of cuckoos, I should say, in Ireland, they use meadow pipits as their main host or foster parents. So the female comes, they mate, and she goes off and she will lay up to 5 eggs. But she has to find 5 meadow pipit nests that are at the exact egg-laying stage. So firstly, they have to find nests. Secondly, they have to get into that nest and lay an egg and take one of the meadow pipit's eggs without being seen. Because if you're spotted, they might abandon that nest. And they remove one egg because a female meadow pipit will have built her nest. She will sit down on the eggs. If she had 5 leaving, but now there's 6, she will know something is wrong. So the female cuckoo has to get in there. So she has to get in and lay an egg and take an egg and get out within a few seconds, because if she's seen, she's in trouble. And of course, the evolution of cuckoos is that the egg hatches ahead of all the others. So the cuckoo chick emerges ahead of the others. And the egg color of cuckoos that lay in meadow pipits are the same color. They've evolved to be roughly the same color as a meadow pipit. And little cuckoo emerges, and he's built like a weightlifter on steroids, and he's a big hollow down his back. And what he does is he shoves all the other eggs out of the nest. He or she has to do that without being seen, because you don't want your parents going back and discover that you are a murderer, that you are an insane, mad little chick, which will kill everything. So the cuckoo instinctively hears whether there's adults around. And if there's nothing around, he will push all these eggs out. And then the parent meadow pipits come back and go, "Oh my God, we've been raided. All of our eggs are gone. What has happened? Thank God little Johnny is still here. At least we still have one to raise." Now, what little Johnny really is the cuckoo in the nest. And he starts begging. And their ability to beg, you've often heard little, young birds, cheeping, cheep, 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 cheep. They're able to mimic the sound of about 5 birds, which gets these adults into a frenzy of feeding. And they feed and feed and feed and feed this young cuckoo to a point where the cuckoo is too big to sit in the nest, and they leave the nest. And oftentimes, by the time the cuckoo is fledged, as in ready to leave, it is 10 times bigger than the meadow pipits. And oftentimes the only way a meadow pipit can feed the cuckoo is to stand on its back and push food down its throat. But when you think about what cuckoos are really doing, they are entrusting their gene pool to another bird, not only like to another bird, but to another species of bird. It's a big risk for you to do that. When you consider what all of the other birds are doing, they're killing themselves, making sure that their genes go forward. A cuckoo is entrusting, a meadow pipit to raise your young. It's the equivalent of someone, you giving birth and handing your baby over to a gorilla or a chimpanzee to raise. It's you're trusting your future, your genetics to a meadow pipit. And it's very interesting in that meadow pipits still don't realize that this is a cuckoo. They think, God, we have raised a big strapper of a lad. He could play for Leinster, in the rugby. He's a big guy. And the even more extraordinary thing is that the young cuckoo doesn't realize he's a cuckoo. He's imprinted on meadow pipits. And that's really important, because if that young cuckoo is a female, she will be evolved to lay eggs that match meadow pipits' nests and meadow pipits' eggs. So she is imprinted on meadow pipits, and she will always target meadow pipit nests. The male, it isn't that important. They don't meet each other. The young birds don't meet the adults until they go to South Africa. But who tells them to go to South Africa? They just do it instinctively. I can't finish spring and summer without the bird that really is the summer. One swallow does not a summer make, and I suppose this year that's certainly been true. Swallows are my favorite birds. They are just extraordinary things. I think they are the species that really captured something in my mind. That beautiful glossy blue back, long wings, long pointed tail, beautiful red throat and forehead. And when they're in flight, you see these long tail streamers with white windows inside each feather of the tail. Let me tell you a little bit about swallows. A swallow is only the size of your hand. You can, hold a little swallow in your hand, and these little tail feathers stick out there. A swallow weighs about 17, 18 grams. And to get an idea what that is, a bag of potato crisps that you buy in the shops is 37, 36 grams, I should say. That's twice the weight of a swallow. A swallow is only half the weight of a bag of crisps. They have a little brain the size of a frozen pea. That's the essence of a swallow. That is what a swallow is. And yet when you think about what the swallows that are flying around Waterford, flying around Wicklow, flying around Britain, anywhere you are, what they have done is quite extraordinary. They have spent the winter in South Africa, 10,000 kilometers from Ireland, over 6,000 miles. In late February, they start moving out of South Africa. Airbirds, the ones that come into Ireland and Britain, travel along the sort of west coast over the Kalahari Desert. They move through subtropical and tropical and then equatorial Africa. They then continue moving up until they reach the Sahara Desert. At this stage, they try and feed up as best they can, take on as much fuel, because they're going to fly non-stop across the Sahara Desert. And the Sahara Desert is expanding year on year. So these birds are traveling across the Sahara Desert. If they're lucky, they will then whiz around, take a left around the Atlas Mountains into Morocco, cross over the Mediterranean Sea into places like Spain, Portugal. They will then start moving up through Spain, over the Pyrenees, onto the French coast. And Irish birds will leave the French coast, cross the Bay of Biscay, up across the St. George's Channel, and reach the south coast of Ireland. Think about that. A little bird born in Ireland that's only the size of your hand is capable of finding its way back to Ireland. And if you thought that was something quite special, when you think about what they really do, is that if a swallow was born in Wicklow or Westmeath or Offaly or Donegal, not only do they come back to Ireland, but they come back to the same county that they were born in. Not only that, if they were born in, Wicklow, they'll come back to Wicklow. But if they were born in Newcastle and Wicklow, they'll come back to Newcastle. In fact, if they were born in a shed in my garage last summer, if they survived, the male chicks will not just come back to Ireland, Wicklow, Newcastle, but will find their way back to the exact same shed that they were born in. The females come to within 2 or 3 kilometers of where they were born. And they navigate that journey with a brain the size of a frozen pea. And I suppose the truth is that we're beginning to understand it. They have magnets in their brain. They're able to see the magnetic fields of the earth. They have photographic memories. They're able to understand the North Pole and how the stars revolve around the North Pole to get their position on the earth. It's quite an extraordinary thing for a bird with a little brain like that. And I've met a swallow who was 10 years old. And he was living in a shed in Eden Derry. Now I needed to get a map and, GPS coordinates to find my way to this shed. It was an old barn. But this bird was 10 years old, and we knew that because a ring had been put on his leg. And that bird had returned to the same shed for 10 summers in a row. Think about that. That bird had flown the Sahara Desert at least 20 times in its lifetime, possibly more, because it was an adult when that ring was put on. And, I held that bird in my hand. And, when I was a kid, there was something that I wanted to do. It's like, I had a wish. I would love to be able to speak swallow. And I still have that sort of mad desire. I would love to be able to speak swallow for just once. I would love to be able to look at a swallow and say, look, come here. Can I ask you a few questions here? How do you do that? Like, what have you seen? What's happened to you since I last saw you? They are truly inspirational birds. And I've been very lucky in that I do have them nesting in our shed here. We put up a small little shed and the swallows are coming in and out. I know it's just wonderful when you see, a beak full of insects, which means that we have a healthy garden. We grow wildflowers, wildflower meadows. We don't cut anything. We leave everything wild. We've loads and loads of insects and butterflies. It's wonderful. And, you see a swallow coming in and, the chicks are nesting inside this old shed. And They build with mud pellets and interlace them with grass. I'm always reminded of the Lake Isle of Innisfree, small cabin built there of clay and wattles made. And these young birds sit patiently, waiting and waiting and waiting for food. And as soon as the adults come in, they open their mouth. And these mouths are glowing in ultraviolet. And if you see the shape of the tongue, it's almost like an arrow. When the female comes into a dark shed or a dark barn, wherever you are, that's what it sees. The arrow. Put food on the arrow. And that's exactly what they do. And I will always say to people who perhaps live in a farm that has been in their family for generations, the swallows that are nesting there this summer are direct descendants of swallows that nested there 20, 30, 100 years, 200 years ago. There's a direct lineage between the two. And the young birds will stay in the nest for about 3 weeks. Incidentally, people will often ask me how I managed to get photographs like this without disturbing them. When they were hatched, I would sit, when the swallows were building, I would just sit outside the shed and they got used to me, the adults. And when the young were just hatched, I would sit in the shed and just talk quietly to them so that they became aware of my voice, became aware of my presence. I was just part of the shed in their minds, so that when they were able to look over the edge, they weren't in any way flustered by me. I was just like a lawnmower that talked as far as they were concerned. And I was able to take photographs. And I didn't use a flash. I actually always tried to photograph at a certain time. Anybody who's interested in bird photography, always remember the bird comes first. The bird's welfare comes first. That is far more important than getting a good photograph. And once they leave the nest for about 2 weeks, they are outside and they get fed. And they will be fed for about 2 to 3 weeks until, at long last, they are fully independent. I'd love you to just take a look at this little guy. He's 4 or 5 weeks old. And over the next week or two, he is going to start moving all the way down to South Africa. They do extraordinary things. They do amazing things. So what I would love you to do, as a favor to me and as a favor to yourselves, and I will end with this favor, which I always ask, doesn't matter if I'm talking to kids, doesn't matter if I'm talking to adults. I would love you when you see a swallow. It might be tomorrow, it might even be this evening when we're finished. I would love you this year to just go out when you see your first swallow and just take 5 seconds of mindfulness and look at that bird and just imagine the journey that bird has made. It's the most incredible journey. And there it is flying over you. Could you imagine if it could talk? Could you imagine what it would tell you? Could you imagine the journey it's made? But the real favor I always ask of people is to not just do this tonight or tomorrow, but to do this every year for the rest of your lives. If you live to be 120, I would love you to stop each year, each spring when you see your first swallow and just stand and just go, wow, isn't that amazing? And if you could give those 5 seconds as a favor to me, and more importantly, as a favor to yourselves, everything that I have spoken about tonight will be worth my while. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Eric. Wonderful as always, and fantastic pictures to illustrate that. There's been a lot of comments throughout. I'd start at the start. Mary O'Riordan tells everyone that she's read your book, Don't Die in Autumn, and it's a really wonderful read, and I'd highly recommend it. So there it is again. Let that be imprinted on your memory.
Now out as an audio book only last week.
So, great. Yeah. So that's something we recommend. Now, what are we? Peter has texted that we have egrets on the barrow in Boris, And this year we have lots of visits from woodpeckers. They've discovered peanuts. So you're
It's
very
amazing,
lucky.
isn't it?
You're
Yeah.
very lucky, Peter. I did hear the one in Curramore 2 years ago on our walk,
Yes,
but
yes.
I didn't get to see it. I've never seen a woodpecker in Ireland. So and I take it that's Peter who had trouble using the chat before. You've mastered it now. Great. John Stevens asks, are blackcaps especially numerous this year? They seem to be everywhere.
Blackcap numbers are increasing year on year, and it's a bit of a mystery as to why. They seem to be doing very, very well. 30, 40 years ago, there was only a handful of locations in Ireland where you get them. Now they're in just about everywhere. And I think it's that they are wintering successfully, but also breeding successfully. So it may well to be something to do with the lack of insecticides or the increase in habitat. I'm not 100% sure why, but everybody is talking about blackcaps. Blackcaps are just about everywhere. I have them nesting in my back garden now, which, never ever would have seen that,
I suppose there's a natural ebb and flow of populations and that, but of course it's really important to see what the underlying trends are and to see what the alert us to the dangers. Mary O'Riordan has an interesting question. Have you any tips on identifying the song of the blackcap? I find it impossible to ID it.
Yeah, it's a very rich and fast song, but a blackcap will always start off with some scratchy notes. So it's as if they're warming up to sing. So every bit of song always starts off with and then goes into the song, whereas the other birds don't do that. So it's a good way of sussing them out. The other thing is they sing very deep in cover, so they don't always sing out in the open.
Okay, good tips there. John Stevens says, I'm old enough to remember hearing the corncrake calling in the centre of Carlow town on parish land around 1970. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And hopefully numbers will come back in parts of the country.
Yeah, I just, they are stuck. They will not come to former parts because farming practices now are just totally changed. It's a monoculture of grass and things. It's insects and wildflowers are not welcomed. Even silage cutting is cut 2 or 3 times each summer. So the birds will never come back to their haunts unless we disappear. Might be no
harm. There's a number of Miriam says thank you to you, and Mary O'Riordan says she's never understood the fascination with the cuckoo. That's very judgmental, Mary, I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's because it is such an unusual species, and the fascination is that they are evolved mostly in Africa, and the theory is that cuckoos, if you imagine what a cuckoo eats, they eat insects, large insects, they eat grubs, all that kind of stuff. But in Africa, they will follow the flocks of locusts, and as the locusts move, they don't have enough time to stop, build a nest, get a territory, lay the eggs, incubate those eggs, because the locust flocks have moved on. So the theory is with cuckoos is that they started as they were following the locusts, the swarms of locusts, they were laying eggs here and there as they went. And of course, then when they started moving after the last ice age up into Europe, they continued the same concept. So they're a fascinating species, and they're not the only ones that will do that to other. There's a few birds in America, like brown cowbirds, whatever, that do the same thing.
Okay, I mean, they are fascinating, whether you approve or not. That's a different matter. It seems very callous.
It's nature. It's callous. It's nature, and it's evolution.
Yeah.
You can never make judgments on nature.
Denise says she's really enjoying the talk. Your enthusiasm is infectious. As a novice, I don't recognize very many bird calls. Our suburban garden has a bird whose call sounds very like diagwit, diagwit, diagwit. Any ideas what it might be?
I would say song thrush. And the reason why I say that is that song thrushes always repeat their phrases. So if you hear a blackbird is a lovely, it's a wandering song, but song thrushes will always repeat their song. So it might be So because I'm hearing Dia Gwith, I would almost guarantee you that's a song for it.
Okay, great. Then it was such an interesting talk. Look forward to going on a bird walk when that is possible. Well, it will be soon.
Yeah.
And you can always go out yourself, get up early in the morning or go out at dusk. Monica says, very interesting. Thank you. Excellent talk. Peter says, we have egrets on the Barrow and Boris. This year we did lots of visits for woodpeckers, 2 males together one day, and buzzards seem on the increase. Now he did get it through in the chat eventually. Thank you, Peter.
Buzzards are also another species that are becoming widespread, and the reason for that is we are not allowed to put out strychnine. Buzzards were restricted to Northern Ireland. They would come in from Scotland, but as soon as they would cross the border 30 years ago, they would be dead within a day, because we were lacing the countryside with strychnine to kill foxes and pine martens and things. But during European laws, that was prevented, and suddenly the buzzards started coming into Ireland. And they're the best things a farmer ever have. Their main food item are rats and rabbits. So, farmers should welcome them.
Yeah, great. Another success story.
Yeah.
Mary O'Riordan said she so enjoyed the talk. Thank you, Eric, and the Bealtaine Festival. In a normal year, I'd never have had the benefit of tuning in. So that's great. Right. We're reaching new people, and maybe we'll make the trip down, and it'd be a great thing to make a weekend of it. We'll have lots going on for you next year. Jane says, thank you, Eric. It's fantastic, particularly the bird calls. Lots and lots of praise coming in. I'm looking for questions.
I know, keep up with the praise. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to throw praise.
I don't want you getting a big head, Eric. Yeah. So
no fear of that, I'm afraid, Owen. No fear of that.
And then Sheila is asking, are there more birds around this year, or are we just more in tune with them?
I think that's a great question, Sheila. I think since lockdown, people have become far more in tune with nature, because let's face it, most of us were limited to 5 kilometers and doing, walks, and there was less cars around. So bird songs, so many questions came into the Mooney Goes Wild show. Are birds singing louder? No, they're not. No, it's just that things are quieter. And, I think a lot of people are certainly more interested in nature now than they were, a while ago. But a lot of our migrant birds are slow to come in. We've had northerly winds. So if you're trying to, you can imagine you're coming up from Spain and you're facing northerly winds, you'll hold off and hold off and hold off until you get the wind behind you. So there's an awful lot of birds. Swifts have only just really come in, and I think they're about 10 days later than I would normally see them.
Great. Deirdre Cahill, it says it's a fantastic talk and wonders, could Oscar Wilde speak swallow?
I wonder.
Well, unfortunately, we can't talk to Oscar Wilde to ask him. Yeah, and of course, Padraig Pearse wrote a famous story, Oni Nanane,
that's right.
Which featured swallows. Rather sad end to it. So
their Irish name is Fon Logue, which is a traveller. That's their old Irish name, which is a lovely name.
Beautiful name, yes. So thank you very much, Eric. It's been really wonderful as usual. It is wonderful to be in the company of somebody who is so expert, but also so enthusiastic, and your passion has come across. And of course, over decades, you're bringing this, you're igniting the interest in so many people, and you're having a great, making a great contribution to protecting our birds and helping everyone to enjoy our feathered friends' company a lot more. So
thank you for the invitation, Owen and Sheila, and all the crew you have. They're a wonderful crew, and you're doing great stuff there every year, and I've been involved for many years, and it's just wonderful to see what you're doing. And I think you all deserve recognition for everything you're doing there. And it's always a pleasure to present for you. It always is.
Great. And well, on that note, Una is going to join us and tell us what else we can expect over the coming days. Una, actually, first, might I ask you a question? You were involved in an event earlier today, and maybe you might say something about it.
Yeah, so this morning we were joined by some primary school pupils. We had 2 sessions with junior and senior infants, and then with first and second class, and they had the pleasure of meeting Dave and his jungle, as you'll see from the pictures there. He had chameleons and snakes, a tarantula, scorpions, all kinds of creatures, and elicited some very strong reactions from some of those primary school pupils. But we have a range of school activities going on every day this week, so lots to join in on for all ages this week.
Yeah, and we have some guides available on the website.
We do. So if you're looking to keep yourself busy, and if you enjoyed hearing from Eric and you want to learn more about birds, we have some fabulous guides on the website, including how you can start bird watching in your garden, bird watching in Ireland, and identifying some of our common species. And there's a lovely guide on there as well from Glenview National Park up in Donegal on all the birds that live in their park. So that's worth a look as well. And then in terms of activities, we have some how-tos on how to make your own bird feeders from recycled bottles and from oranges and all kinds of things, as well as a nice little bird bath. If you want to improve your bird watching game, you have to attract them to the garden. But I liked Eric's tip of having the logs there somewhere for them to land. That's a great one.
And tomorrow, what can we expect on Living Earth TV?
So coming up tomorrow, we're going to be taking you on a stroll through JFK Arboretum in County Wexford. And the guides there are going to be talking us through their conifer conservation project. Try to say that a couple of times in a row. And we're going to be having a look actually at some of the rhododendrons there that are in bloom. We'll only be having a look at a couple because they actually have around 500 different types of rhododendrons there in the Arboretum. And we're also going to be able to have a live discussion there with 2 of the craft gardeners tomorrow evening. So you'll be able to put your questions to them.
Great. And so hopefully we'll see people back tomorrow evening to visit the wonderful JFK Arboretum. I should just say, seeing as we're going to be in Wexford tomorrow, we need to give mention to Wexford County Council have launched their new rewilding campaign, where they're going to let some areas go wild and go back to nature, something that Eric was talking about earlier. So fair play to Wexford Council, and it's good to see things starting to happen, and more things will happen if we, the citizens, make those requests to our councils. And I do think that there is a change in mood, and I do think accompanied, I suppose, by the concern about climate change, there is a change in mood that people are starting to take biodiversity loss and climate change seriously. So we need to welcome that. And I'm sure you can find more about that on their website. So we hope we'll see you all tomorrow. Once again, thank you, Eric. Once again,
My pleasure. Thank you, Owen.
And once again, thank you, the CalMAS team, all our other partners who support us during the week, and thank you in particular to you, the audience, and we're here for you, and thank you for all your comments. You'll see at the bottom our contacts. We showed some photographs earlier. Send in your pictures of birds, because we're going to have a competition tomorrow evening. We'll announce the winner. So share pictures of birds on Twitter, on Facebook, or even email them into us, and we will share a selection of them tomorrow, and we will have a prize of a family pass to an OPW site for the competition winners tomorrow. So we'll see you all again tomorrow at 5:30, and we'll continue our exploration and our celebration of biodiversity and our living earth. Thank you.
Thank you.